So almost as soon as this ruling came down, we started to hear cheers of sorts from the left. Trevor Noah of The Daily Show went on Twitter to encourage people to, quote, celebrate the SCOTUS ruling. Go knock someone up in Texas. I kid you not. And then there was the former Texas State Senator, Wendy Davis, who got national attention for crusading against this law. Here she is.
Well, I'm overjoyed. I have to tell you, I was fighting back tears a moment ago as I was reading the SCOTUS blog, and the first line that came out saying that the Fifth Circuit opinion or decision had been reversed. It's incredible news for the women of Texas. It's incredible news for the women throughout this country.
Interesting. So joining me now, Ben Shapiro is an attorney and editor-in-chief at dailywire.com, and Ebony Williams is an attorney and a Fox News contributor. Welcome to both of you.
Thank you, Martha.
I want to get your thoughts on the ruling, but your thoughts first, culturally, on the reaction that this got from some on the left. Ben, what do you think?
Well, I mean, I think number one, Trevor Noah is slightly below bubonic plague on the funny scale, so it's not really a shock that he'd come out with a tweet like that. But this shouldn't be a surprise. I think Trevor Noah kind of let loose what a lot of Democrats actually think, which is that there's no reason abortion should be safe, legal, and rare. The internal logic of that statement, the old Clinton formulation, doesn't hold. If abortion is about aborting something that isn't fully human, then why should it be rare? And if it is about aborting something that is human, then why exactly should it be legal? So the full-scale celebration that you see, the idea that abortion is actually birth control, that's what most Democrats believe, including the Democratic Party platform, which it was revealed today, calls for a destruction of literally all state and federal laws that restrict, quote, access to an abortion, as well as public funding for abortion both at home and abroad. They don't believe abortion should be safe, legal, and rare. They think that it's just a form of birth control.
Ebony, what do you think?
Well, look, I thought the tweet from Trevor Noah was ignorant, sad, and very distracting from what I thought was a very classical constitutional analysis delivered by the court today, and I thought that was sad. I've got to respectfully disagree with Ben on the fact that most Democrats see abortions as a primary method of birth control or method at all of birth control. I'm just simply not aware of the data that shows that. I know for people that I know personally that are pro-choice, they are just that. They're pro the woman's right to choose, actually not pro-abortion even, and certainly not advocating that be some method of birth control. That's why we have other actual birth control options.
Yeah, I mean, there were other pro-choice individuals who said that they were horrified by some of these expressions.
Disgusting.
By the one that Trevor Noah put out. You're shaking your head, Ben. You don't believe that?
Yeah, why? I mean, I'm just wondering
disgusting.
exactly why there's...
I thought it was a disgusting claim because it was a celebration, and it kind of, to me, underscored the point you made, Ben, and I think it's a sad and disgusting point that anyone in this country would view abortion as a method of birth control.
But why would you object to that? If you don't think that the child is fully human, then why would you care?
First of all, nobody said that. I think that you're connecting dots that I've certainly not stated. That to
so if the child is fully human, why are you okay with aborting it?
So to be pro-choice. Actually, you know what? Senator Marco Rubio, I thought, really brilliantly laid out this analysis in one of the debates where he talked about this issue of whether or not the child is unborn, and does the child have rights, and also does the mother have rights, and where do those rights intersect or overlap. And I'm someone that believes that certainly the unborn child has rights. I believe that the mother has rights. I simply happen to be a person, and some believe that those mothers' rights deem to usurp those rights. But certainly it's not to disrespect.
In what world would any of my rights allow me to kill another human being?
Well, Ben, again, you're not a woman, and as a woman, I'm someone that's simply saying it is my position that a woman has a right to dictate the choices around her body, but that is not to ignore or take away the rights of any unborn child.
I'm not a slaveholder either. That doesn't mean that I get to let slaveholders define what constitutes property and what constitutes a human being.
Ben. That's good news. I'm really glad that you're not.
No, the point that I'm making, I mean, if you'd let me finish the sentence, the point that I'm making is that the greatest moral problem in society historically is the idea that you get to arbitrarily define what is human and what is not based on your own convenience.
I don't believe it's arbitrary, and again, this is not a discussion about humanness, but thank you.
Ebony, thank you very much.
Thank you so
for
much,
being
Martha.
here. Ben Shapiro, thanks to you as well. A very big decision and controversial indeed coming out of Texas.
Disproportionate amount of single motherhood in African-American communities, right? And so starting in 1960 or 1970 with Roe v. Wade, we had this boom of legalization of abortion, which I kind of appreciate your understanding the pro-life argument. I was very pro-choice until I heard that, and it kind of made me in that middle ground of like, oh, I don't really know what to do. So I did some research. And so finding that when abortion was legalized, you look at Romania and then you look at America, right? This is the Freakonomics argument. You saw that there was a decrease in crime between people under 25 in the 1990s. And so this kind of made me think that maybe this is a correlation between that of the white and African American communities, because at that time, African American youths were predominantly low income. So they didn't have access to that form of contraception, which I think is why we feel that today. While there is this huge proportion of, what you're saying, 70% of single motherhoods are African American, if not that's the reason, I was just curious, what is the reason, and then what is the solution to that?
Okay, so abortion is not the reason for the drop in crime. First of all, even if it were the reason for the drop in crime, it's not an excuse for killing babies. So, so that's number one. The evidence that it's not the reason for the drop in crime, Barry Latzer makes this argument in a book it's a very good book called The Rise and Fall of Violent Crime in America. And he talks about the fact that there was a huge violent crime spike in the United States in the mid-1980s. And it only ended in about 1994. From 1994 to 2010, there was an enormous violent crime decrease. Okay, the problem is that abortion, the top coterie of people who commit crimes are people between the ages of 14 and 20. That is the key age where people commit crimes. And what you see is that abortion was legalized in 1973. What you would assume then is that the crime rates would begin to drop in the late 80s. Right? They begin to drop in like 1987. Right? That's when people who had been born but weren't would have turned 14 or 15 years old. Right? But that's not what happened. The crime rates only began to drop in 1994, 1995, coincident with something Hillary Clinton ran away from, her husband's crackdown on crime. And once you put more cops on the streets and put people in jail for crime, it turns out they're not on the streets to commit crime. So the correlation doesn't actually fit. So the idea that that's the case, it also doesn't make sense, because the fact is that the number of abortions has decreased markedly over the last 10 or 15 years, and you haven't seen a consummate spike in crime. So abortion rates started to decrease by the mid-90s. And so you would figure that there had been a big spike in crime around 2008, 2009, no big spike in crime. So the correlation doesn't even fit. If you're going to, correlation doesn't equal causation, but in order for there to be causation, there has to at least be some proof of correlation. There's not even proof of correlation.
That was my question. My question was more or less, what is the reason why there's such a disproportionate amount of single mothers in the African American poverty, like in that realm of?
Because, okay, so the real reason that there's a lot of single motherhood in the black community is because single motherhood has increased tremendously across all communities. So it used to be that in 1960, 5% of white women were single mothers. Today, it's 40% of white women. So all across, it's increased. Single motherhood in the black community has been a bigger problem than in the white community because, yes, of pathologies of slavery. That goes all the way back to, back in slave times, the rate of single motherhood was really high because of forcible separation of families, and that carried over into Jim Crow as well, although it was beginning to decline, actually, in the 1950s, in the 1940s and the 1950s. With the explosion of welfare, which was directly targeted at low-income communities, which happened to be disproportionately minority, now there was an actual economic incentive to continue in pathologies of single motherhood. That if you were thinking about getting married before you had the baby, now maybe you didn't think quite as hard about it because, after all, the government was there to pick you up. And so the single motherhood rate continues to rise at a very high rate, but it's rising similarly at a high rate in the white community too. So I don't want to pretend it's solely a black problem, single motherhood. It isn't. There's a very high single motherhood rate in the black community, high rate in the white community, high rate in the Hispanic community. That's mainly because of the sexual revolution and the ideas from the left that a child doesn't need a mother and a father, and that there's some sort of inherent virtue that attends to being a single mother, which is really an irritating thing. There's a lot more virtue that attends to being a responsible mother, marrying dad, and then there being two parents there to help raise the kid. It's a source of never-ending annoyance to me that the way the popular culture treats disparate situations is that my wife, who's responsible enough to get married, wait a few years, have a job, have kids, that in the heroism pantheon, she is secondary to the girl who decided to get pregnant out of wedlock at 19 and live in poverty. Like, that just doesn't make any sense. Good decisions should be rewarded by society.
What's the solution, though?
The solution is,
Poor-income households who are disproportionately African American.
okay, so the ones who've already had kids or the ones who have not had kids yet?
Today and in, like, just in the community.
I know, I'm asking you, are you talking about the ones who have kids already or the ones who don't have kids already? Okay, so the ones who have kids already, the solution is that we have to have a social network that is built up for them, and that can't be provided by government. Okay, that needs to be provided by a growing charitable association base. It needs to be attended to by a religious community. A huge percentage of the black community still goes to churches. Those churches should take a heavy role in encouraging marriage, and they should take a heavy role in helping people pick up after themselves once life mistakes have been made. And I think that many of those churches are working on that. But those mistakes cannot be unmade by society just by handing people checks, because all that does is prolong the pathology. So what you really do have to do is help. As you have to have family members that help you out. You have to have a social network that helps you out, and that's going to be rebuilt over a course of time. There's no immediate solution. I'm not going to pretend that I have an immediate turnkey solution for a single mom who made a lot of mistakes, is living in poverty, and now I'm going to turn her into a millionaire overnight. I can't do that. The government can't do that. No one can do that. The government can't take my money and give it to her and make her wealthy. The government can't take your money and give it to her and make her responsible. Okay, the fact is that individual decisions matter even after you've made a bad one.
Thank you.